The unthinkable truth is this: your mind is lying to you. Every thought you trust, every assumption you hold, every fact you cling to, it's a fabrication, a shadow, a reflection of a reflection. And yet, you live your life as though it were gospel. Right now, as you sit, as you breathe, as you scroll through distractions, your brain is rehearsing fears that will never happen, doubts that have no basis, and stories that were never true. It whispers, "You're not enough. You can't do this. They'll reject you. You'll fail." And you obey. You obey like a soldier to an unseen general, marching straight into anxiety, stress, and limitation. Here's the paradox. You're trapped in a prison built entirely of your own imagination. The walls are thoughts. The bars are beliefs. The locks are memories twisted into lies. And the terrifying part, most people will spend over 90,000 hours inside this invisible prison, chasing security, chasing validation, chasing the illusion of control, and never realize freedom was only one shift away. Imagine living a life where every decision isn't contaminated by fear, where every moment isn't weighed down by doubt, where your mind is a tool, not a tyrant. Imagine waking up to clarity so sharp it cuts through every mental fog, every past mistake, every imagined catastrophe. Imagine realizing the life you wanted was never blocked by circumstances, money, or people. It was blocked by your thoughts. Here's the most shocking revelation. The mind you trust, the one you think is you, is not you at all. It's a storyteller, a trickster, a manipulator. It can create entire realities that never exist and convince you to fight wars that aren't yours to fight. It can make you suffer for no reason, chase illusions for decades, and accept limitations that were never real. And the cruelest part? Most people never even notice. They believe every thought, they follow every urge, they obey the invisible chains, and they die without ever tasting the true essence of freedom, creativity, and power. But you're about to see the mind from a perspective almost no one ever experiences. You're about to step behind the curtain. You're about to witness the machinery of thought exposed, stripped of authority, stripped of control, stripped of the power to rule over you. And once you see it, nothing will ever be the same. This journey isn't comforting. It isn't easy. It will challenge everything you thought you knew about yourself. It will make you question your choices, your fears, your memories. But if you survive it, if you truly observe rather than obey, you will unlock a level of clarity, peace, and freedom that is practically indescribable. The first step is simple. Not easy, but simple. Recognize the lie. Recognize that your thoughts are not truth. They are a system, a pattern, a repeating loop that has fooled humanity for centuries. And once you see it, the path to mastery begins. By the time this journey is over, you will understand a paradox so profound that it will feel like the rules of reality have shifted. You will know that your mind is simultaneously your greatest tool and your cruelest jailer, and that the choice to be free has always been yours, even if you never realized it. Every thought you've ever believed will be challenged. Every assumption you held will be questioned. Every fear, every hope, every imagined limitation will be dissected. And what remains will be clarity. Pure, unshakable, unstoppable clarity. This is not a promise. This is a warning. Most people will reject this truth. Most will run back into comfort, into distraction, into the illusion that their thoughts define reality. But if you stay, if you observe, if you learn the secret that almost no one teaches, you will step into a life that most can't even imagine. Your mind has been lying to you. The question is, will you finally stop believing it?
Chapter 1. The Mind You Don't Own. From the moment you wake, your mind begins its relentless work. Thoughts arrive like uninvited guests, storming your consciousness, dictating moods, commanding decisions. They feel urgent, necessary, inevitable, yet none of them are truly yours. Each one is a fragment of memory, a distorted interpretation, a habit loop rehearsed so many times it masquerades as truth. Every morning, millions of people experience the same invisible tyranny. A single thought flares up, "I'm not enough." Instantly, the body tenses, the heart accelerates, the breath constricts. The mind orchestrates panic, judgment, and self-sabotage without consent. And the terrifying part is that most people obey automatically, believing they are powerless, believing they are thinking rationally, believing the narrative their mind spins is reality. Neuroscience reveals a staggering reality. The human brain generates over 60,000 thoughts per day. Most are repetitive, most are irrelevant, most are negative. And yet the average person treats every single one as a command, as a signal, as an undeniable truth. Take the case of Sarah. She was a marketing executive, drowning in anxiety. Every morning, her mind screamed, "They will judge you. You are failing. You are inadequate." Each thought felt real, immediate, catastrophic. Each thought shaped her entire day, her decisions, her interactions. She believed she was reacting to reality, when in truth, she was reacting to her mind's endless rehearsals of disaster. The breakthrough came when she began observing her thoughts instead of merging with them. A single shift. She stopped identifying with each mental narrative. She realized the voice of fear was not a reflection of truth, but a projection of past experiences and conditioned patterns. The transformation was immediate. Stress levels dropped, clarity emerged, confidence replaced paralysis. Her life trajectory shifted not because circumstances changed, but because her perception did. The mind's default mode is deceptive. It thrives on repetition, on drama, on false urgency. It will fabricate threats, exaggerate risks, and replay failures endlessly. It creates invisible walls that limit potential. It traps people in cycles of self-doubt, regret, and fear, making ordinary challenges feel like unsurmountable mountains. And because these thoughts feel so real, so urgent, most never question them, never see them as illusions, never recognize the cage that surrounds them. Your mind is a storyteller. It spins narratives about who you are, what the world is like, and what must happen next. It edits history, forecasts futures that never exist, and convinces you that these fictions are inevitable. Every thought you obey reinforces the chains. Every assumption you accept deepens the prison. And the cruelest trick, the mind convinces you that freedom comes from following these narratives, obeying these commands, satisfying these illusions. Imagine living a life where this illusion is shattered, where you recognize the difference between thought and reality, where you step back, observe, and refuse to surrender to every impulse, judgment, and fear. Imagine the liberation of realizing that nearly everything your mind commands is optional, manipulable, and often false. Observation alone is the first key. A single habit can shift everything. Noticing when a thought arises, labeling it as just a thought, and refusing to act automatically. This creates a gap between stimulus and reaction, a space where true freedom emerges. In that space, clarity arises, creativity flourishes, decisions become intentional rather than reactive. The life you've always wanted, success, peace, influence, mastery, begins to appear not as a distant goal, but as a natural consequence of seeing the mind for what it really is. But even this realization only scratches the surface, because the mind does not limit itself to thoughts alone. It infiltrates the body, distorts perception, manipulates memory, and hijacks emotion. The next layer of deception is deeper, more insidious, and almost invisible. Most people never notice. They live as prisoners, mistaking thought for truth. Every decision is filtered through fear, every risk avoided, every potential unrealized. And yet the pathway to liberation is simpler than imagination allows. It begins with awareness, yes, but awareness alone is the gateway, not the destination. The journey continues deeper into the machinery of thought itself,
where the patterns, loops, and tricks of the mind are exposed and dismantled. And when you reach that level, when you witness the mind's inner workings without judgment, without resistance, you realize a terrifying, exhilarating truth. You have been living under the illusion of control your entire life. The chains were never on your circumstances, never on other people, never on events. They were inside your mind. And the moment you step back, observe, and refuse to obey, the entire prison collapses. The mind you don't own has ruled silently for decades, but now the reign of unseen authority begins to dissolve. And what comes next will reveal just how deep the illusion goes, how thoughts shape not only perception, but reality itself, and how few humans ever see the machinery behind the curtain. Chapter 2. The Thought Trap. Every human mind is a theater of illusion. From the instant a thought arises, it demands belief, commands attention, and orchestrates action as if it were reality. Yet almost every story it tells is false, a reconstruction, a distortion, a shadow of what has been and what might never be. The mind does not simply present information. It fabricates worlds, rehearses catastrophes, inflates dangers, and convinces you that these projections are immutable truth. Imagine waking up to a single thought. Something terrible is about to happen. Your heart accelerates, muscles tense, breath becomes shallow. The mind delivers images, scenarios, worst-case endings, and yet none of them exist outside the theater of your awareness. You are reacting to ghosts, illusions, echoes of memory replayed in endless loops. And this is not rare. This is the default setting of the human experience. Neuroscience shows that the human brain is a prediction engine. It continuously anticipates the future, scanning the environment for threats, risks, failures, but it cannot distinguish between a real threat and a projected one. When your mind imagines disaster, your body responds as if disaster were real. Cortisol floods your system, muscles tighten, attention narrows, and rationality evaporates. You are enslaved to a narrative that does not exist. Consider the patterns repeated in history. Leaders who anticipated betrayal and imagined conspiracies lost empires. Investors paralyzed by fear of imagined market collapses watched fortunes evaporate before they even made a move. Ordinary people let relationships dissolve, opportunities slip away, and dreams fade, not because of circumstance, but because imagined obstacles appeared real. The mind is relentless in its storytelling. It edits memory, distorts facts, and amplifies drama. Every negative event from the past is replayed as if it defines the present. Every imagined future catastrophe becomes a chain that limits potential. Every subtle judgment by others is magnified into evidence that you are insufficient, unworthy, or doomed. You are not seeing reality. You are witnessing the interpretation, edited, biased, rehearsed, and rehearsed again. The danger of these illusions is subtle but devastating. Thoughts are automatic, and their authority is assumed. You believe them without questioning. Every decision, every hesitation, every risk avoided, every opportunity ignored, filtered through falsehoods, fantasies, and fear-driven predictions. The human mind, left unchecked, is a trap. It is a snare that convinces the prey to stay exactly where it is, imagining danger, avoiding freedom, and repeating cycles of self-limitation for decades. Take Michael, a trader, paralyzed by projections of loss before a single trade occurred. He believed his imagined risks were real. Every scenario he rehearsed convinced him that disaster awaited. He lost nothing tangible at first, but the hesitation, the fear, the inability to act kept him stagnant for years. When he learned to step outside the narratives, to separate observation from reaction, every decision became grounded, precise, and empowered. He discovered that the real threat had never been the market, it had been the mind. The trap is not external. It is invisible. It is silent. It is pervasive. It is the mind convincing itself that restriction, fear, and limitation are truth. And yet this prison is entirely voluntary. The chains are self-imposed. You obey because you believe you must. You follow because you assume the commands of your mind are non-negotiable. Escape begins with a single act: noticing. Observing thoughts as they arise without merging with them, without assuming their authority, without reacting automatically. But even noticing is only the first step. The mind is clever. It will resist. It will fabricate new justifications, new urgencies, new fears, new stories that claim reality and demand obedience. The deeper you observe, the more it escalates. It knows that awareness is the first threat to its dominion. The mind is not just reactive, it is creative. It can invent entire worlds, entire futures, entire identities that never existed, and it convinces you that these are inevitable, unavoidable, undeniable. It makes suffering feel essential. It makes limitation feel mandatory. It makes inaction feel like wisdom. Every thought reinforced by repetition, every imagined failure validated by memory, every anticipation of loss polished with emotion becomes a prison. But the paradox is profound. Once you see the trap, you also see the key. The very mechanism that constructs limitation can be dismantled, observed, and transcended. Every thought that once dictated your life can become data, information, neutral observation. Every projection can be separated from choice. Every fear can be exposed as imagined. And in that exposure lies power, clarity, and liberation unlike anything you have ever experienced. The trap is deep, and it is subtle. It will continue to whisper, escalate, fabricate, and seduce. But every whisper that is observed without obedience chips away at the invisible bars of your prison. Every moment of non-reaction is a crack in the wall. Every conscious choice over automatic surrender strengthens freedom. Yet even this understanding is only the beginning. The mind does not stop with illusions of events or threats. It invades the body, rewires perception, distorts emotion, and even manipulates identity itself. What you think you feel, what you think you are, what you think is true, it can all be engineered by patterns in thought that you have never questioned. The next chapter will reveal this insidious layer, how your thoughts are not merely stories, but architects of your physical experience, your emotions, and the very sense of who you believe yourself to be. And once you see this, the mind's power to deceive becomes almost unbearable.
Listen, if this audiobook gave you even one powerful idea, don't just stop here. Hit subscribe right now, tap like, and share it with one person who needs this. Your growth and theirs starts with this click. Chapter 3. The Body-Mind Illusion. Your mind does not live in isolation. It inhabits your body, infiltrates every nerve, every muscle, every heartbeat, and silently engineers experiences you believe are objective. Thoughts are not abstract. They are chemical architects, orchestrating tension, fatigue, pain, and emotion. Fear is not just imagined, it becomes physical. Anxiety tightens the chest, knots the stomach, and accelerates the pulse. Every imagined catastrophe triggers biological consequences that feel undeniable, unavoidable, real. Consider the way tension accumulates. A single thought, "I am failing," flares a chain reaction. Stress hormones flood the bloodstream. Blood pressure rises. Muscles tighten unconsciously. Breathing becomes shallow. The mind insists danger exists, even when reality is harmless, even when every circumstance is neutral. Your body obeys the mind's lies with absolute fidelity, turning fiction into experience. This phenomenon has been documented in countless studies. Psychosomatic responses are not rare, they are universal. A mind convinced of threat manipulates the nervous system, the immune system, and even cellular function.
Chronic worry can cause migraines, back pain, insomnia, digestive issues. Long-term anxiety rewires the brain itself, strengthening pathways of fear, weakening circuits of clarity and calm. The body becomes a canvas on which the mind paints illusions as tangible suffering. Emma, a software engineer, spent years haunted by untraceable pain, migraines, tension in her shoulders, digestive disturbances. Doctors could find nothing wrong. Conventional treatment offered temporary relief at best. Then she noticed a pattern. Each flare coincided with repetitive, judgmental thoughts, stories her mind insisted were real. Perfectionism, guilt, imagined criticism. Her body was replaying the mind's rehearsals as physical suffering. The moment she began observing without merging, the pain began to fade. Her body, once enslaved to illusion, began to release decades of tension, exhaustion, and discomfort. The mind's manipulation extends beyond stress. It dictates posture, energy levels, and even the subtle micro-expressions that influence interactions with others. Fear constricts movement, narrows gaze, and signals weakness. Confidence, when generated internally, shifts the body, opens the chest, steadies breath, and projects authority. The body is not just a passive vessel, it is a reflection of internal narrative, a direct echo of thought. What most fail to grasp is this: the mind can make you experience reality that never exists. A thought of rejection triggers avoidance, a heart pounding, a stomach twisting. You feel real consequences, yet no objective event has occurred. Hunger, fatigue, tension, nausea, all can be induced purely by anticipation, memory, or imagination. The mind manufactures experiences so convincingly that the body obeys with no resistance. This is why people become addicted to fear, stress, and drama. The body has been trained to respond as if the illusions are real. Even the simplest moments are infiltrated. A glance, a word, a perceived judgment. The mind amplifies, distorts, and transforms these into a narrative that triggers physiological response. Most lives are lived in this cycle. Thought creates tension, tension creates emotion. Emotion reinforces thought. Days, months, decades pass in a feedback loop of self-imposed suffering, yet few notice the invisible architects at work. Freedom lies in observation. By noticing the mind's influence over the body, by separating thought from automatic reaction, the cycle begins to unravel. Breath can be slowed, heart rate calmed, muscles relaxed, pain dissipates. Emotion stabilizes. The body, once enslaved by illusion, begins to follow a new script, one dictated not by unconscious fear, but by conscious awareness. But even this revelation, profound as it is, only exposes the surface. The mind's deception extends beyond physical manipulation. It rewires perception of reality, shapes memory, distorts self-identity, and designs entire futures that never exist. The illusions are not confined to sensation, they're architects of belief, identity, and destiny. The next layer goes deeper than tension, pain, or fatigue. It infiltrates imagination, prediction, and the anticipation of events. It convinces the mind that disaster is inevitable, that failure is certain, that limitation is unavoidable, and it does so in a way that feels completely rational, undeniable, and necessary. Once you recognize that your body has been obeying thought illusions for decades, that physical suffering, emotion, and behavior are largely consequences of imagined realities, you glimpse the extent of the prison you inhabit. The mind is not a passive observer, it is a relentless engineer, designing experience and consequence without your permission. The scale of its control is vast, the depth almost unfathomable. Yet the moment of recognition is also the doorway to liberation. Awareness transforms authority. Observation diminishes control. And in the space between thought and reaction, freedom begins to emerge. The body, the mind, and perception all are malleable. All can be unshackled. All can be recalibrated. The journey does not end here. The mind's deception reaches further. Not only does it control thought and body, but it hijacks perception of the past, of others, and of the future. What you believe you remember, anticipate, or know about yourself is often an illusion, a narrative fabricated by the same architect that creates tension in your chest. The next chapter will uncover this invisible layer, the mind's control over time, memory, and identity itself, revealing illusions more intimate, more pervasive, and more consequential than ever before. Chapter 4. The Future That Isn't Real. Almost every moment of your life is being dictated not by what exists, but by what your mind imagines might exist. You anticipate outcomes, rehearse failures, predict rejection, and plan for catastrophes that may never occur. And the mind, relentless in its authority, convinces you that these projections are facts, unavoidable, inevitable, and non-negotiable. Consider waking up and instantly imagining failure. A single thought, I will embarrass myself today. Instantly, posture tightens, muscles contract, breathing constricts, and heart rate climbs. Your body obeys the mind's fiction. Even before a single interaction takes place, you are physically, emotionally, and mentally reacting as if the imagined event has already happened. And most people never question it. They assume these projections are reliable, rational, and accurate. The mind is a prediction engine, wired to scan for threat and risk. Its calculations, however, are not neutral. They are biased, negative, self-reinforcing. Cognitive psychology demonstrates that humans consistently overestimate negative outcomes and underestimate positive ones. We anticipate disaster more vividly than opportunity. We rehearse rejection more vividly than acceptance. We fear scarcity more vividly than abundance. Our brains are survival machines, designed for threat, not for flourishing. Yet we obey as if their outputs were gospel truth. This is why fear of the future dominates decision-making. Careers stagnate because imagined failure feels more real than actual opportunity. Relationships falter because projections of disappointment outweigh authentic interaction. Millions of moments, choices, and possibilities slip away, not because of reality, but because the mind has created a convincingly real illusion of threat. Michael, a trader, provides a vivid example. He would rehearse catastrophic losses over and over before even placing a single trade. Each imagined failure produced physical tension, emotional distress, and paralysis of action. His decisions were governed not by market conditions, not by data, not by strategy, but by projections his mind had convinced him were real. The market, in truth, had no knowledge of his fear. The disaster existed entirely in his imagination, yet it dominated his reality. The mind does not stop at fear. It fabricates entire scenarios, weaving together fragments of memory, emotion, and imagination into elaborate narratives of the future. You anticipate criticism that has not occurred, rejection that may never come, financial collapse that is purely speculative. You are constantly living in a version of reality that does not exist, a reality so convincing that your body, attention, and emotions are hijacked as if it were undeniable fact. Even small projections accumulate into monumental influence. Every imagined failure, every rehearsed catastrophe, every preemptive regret builds invisible walls around potential. Decisions become cautious, risks avoided, opportunities ignored. Life is lived in reaction to shadows rather than to substance. And yet, because the projections feel so urgent, so immediate, so factual, few recognize the fiction. The illusion is complete, and the cost is incalculable. Decades of energy wasted, creativity suppressed, freedom surrendered. The mind's future projections are not neutral. They are emotionally charged, biologically reinforced, and repeatedly rehearsed. Cortisol, adrenaline, and tension prepare the body as if catastrophe is imminent. You act as if disaster is unavoidable, and in doing so, you fulfill the prophecy your imagination invented. The illusion becomes a self-fulfilling trap. Yet awareness is the key. Once you begin to notice that what you fear is not happening, that imagined catastrophes are constructs, that the future exists only as a projection, the dynamic begins to shift. Observation creates distance. Recognition diminishes authority. The mind's imagined futures no longer dictate action with absolute power. Every decision can be grounded in present reality rather than fictional projections. Every breath, every step, every interaction can be chosen freely rather than dictated by anticipation. But even this understanding, profound as it is, only scratches the surface of the mind's manipulation. Because the mind does not merely invent futures, it distorts memory, manipulates identity, and edits the past. What you believe happened yesterday, what you believe others have thought of you, and what you believe you are capable of, all are susceptible to the same machinery. Time, identity, and perception itself become pliable in the hands of thought. The next revelation will take you even deeper, showing how your memories, your self-image, and your understanding of reality have been engineered by thought patterns you never questioned. The illusions that govern your future are mirrored in the illusions that govern your past, and together they have controlled your present. Once you witness this, the scope of the mind's dominion and the magnitude of liberation available becomes almost incomprehensible. Chapter 5. The Illusion of Self. You have spent your entire life believing in a version of yourself, an identity carefully constructed, reinforced, and narrated by your mind. Every thought, every judgment, every fear, every memory you've ever trusted has built an image you call I. But this self, the one you defend, the one you believe defines reality, is largely an illusion. Every memory is selective, every emotion amplified, every story edited. The mind rearranges past events to reinforce its narrative, highlighting failures, replaying embarrassments, exaggerating betrayals, while conveniently minimizing triumphs, resilience, and moments of growth. You think you remember objectively, but the brain does not record reality, it reconstructs it. Every recollection is a rehearsal, a narrative shaped by bias, emotion, and repetition. The self you cling to is a story that has been told so many times it feels undeniable, but the truth is it is malleable, fluid, and largely imagined. Consider how this illusion governs behavior. A single thought of inadequacy, I am not capable of this task, triggers physiological changes. Muscles tighten, posture collapses, breathing constricts, focus narrows. You act as if the limitations are real, reinforcing the very belief you think defines you. The mind's fiction becomes reality because the body obeys, and every action further validates the illusion. You are not experiencing objective truth. You are living within a hallucination crafted by thought and memory. Even your perception of others is filtered through this lens. Interactions are rarely neutral. Every word, glance, or gesture is interpreted through the self-narrative. Criticism feels devastating because the story says you are fragile. Praise feels fleeting because the story says you are unworthy. Relationships, opportunities, and experiences are distorted before they even begin, preemptively reshaped by a self that exists mostly in imagination. History is littered with examples of minds enslaved by identity illusions. Leaders who could not see beyond the narrative of their own authority failed spectacularly. Artists who identified only with past mistakes abandoned genius projects. Athletes crippled by imagined limitations never reached peak performance. The self believed to be real becomes both prison and executioner. The illusion is subtle, omnipresent, and reinforced by repetition. Daily life is a rehearsal stage. Every thought you accept, every assumption you obey, every story you reinforce strengthens the self that confines you. Fear, hesitation, procrastination, doubt, all are byproducts of obedience to a narrative that is not fact. Your body, emotions, and decisions are chained to a ghost you have never questioned. Liberation begins with observation. Noticing the self as a construct rather than an absolute reality dissolves its authority. When you step back, witness, and refuse automatic identification, the illusion weakens. Thoughts lose their weight, memories lose their sting, actions become deliberate rather than reactive. The self, once an unquestioned tyrant, becomes an instrument under conscious control. Yet even this awakening only scratches the surface. The mind does not limit its illusions to identity and memory. It manipulates perception of relationships, projects imagined responses of others, and orchestrates social reality according to its narratives. You live as if other people's judgments are objective, as if their thoughts are factual, as if rejection and approval exist independently of interpretation, and every action is filtered through a lens the mind has constructed without your consent. The next revelation will expose how the mind projects entire social and environmental realities that never exist, hijacking perception, influencing behavior, and shaping the world around you in alignment with illusion rather than truth. The depth of deception is profound, and the scale of liberation available once you see it is extraordinary. Listen, if this audiobook gave you even one powerful idea, don't just stop here. Hit subscribe right now, tap like, and share it with one person who needs this. Your growth and theirs starts with this click. Chapter 6: The World You Never Saw. Your mind does not only control your thoughts, your body, or your identity. It projects entire realities, fabricates social landscapes, and filters every experience before you are even aware of it. What you perceive as the world is not objective. It is a story your mind tells about the world. Every face you meet, every glance you interpret, every word you hear is instantly evaluated, distorted, and placed into a narrative constructed by thought. You believe you see reality, but what you actually experience is perception filtered through the biases, fears, and assumptions of your own mind. A colleague's neutral comment can feel like criticism. A friend's silence becomes rejection. A passerby's glance is interpreted as judgment. The mind constructs a story, and your emotions, your body, and your actions obey unquestioningly. Every day, billions of people live not in reality, but inside these projected worlds. Take Anna, a high-performing executive who constantly felt undermined by peers. Meetings became battles, emails became threats, and casual remarks felt like attacks. Her mind had created a narrative of competition, distrust, and judgment. The world in itself was neutral. The signals she received were ambiguous, neutral, even supportive at times. Yet her mind turned ambiguity into drama, into danger, into limitation. The illusion of threat shaped her behavior, destroyed relationships, and limited her career. Only when she began observing her interpretations rather than merging with them did she see that the world had never conspired against her. It was her perception, her story, that had ensnared her. The mind's power lies in its ability to combine memory, imagination, and emotion to produce narratives that feel unavoidable. It anticipates responses, predicts reactions, and engineers consequences before events even occur. Every judgment you assume exists outside of you is in fact often a reflection of your own inner story projected onto others. Every fear of rejection, every preemptive regret, every imagined humiliation is manufactured internally and obeyed externally. This is why social anxiety feels so real, why missed opportunities hurt so deeply, why people feel trapped in relationships, workplaces, and environments they cannot control. The world you experience is not entirely external. It is shaped, manipulated, and curated by thought. Your perceptions, emotions, and behavior are constantly being aligned to a narrative that exists largely in imagination, yet demands obedience as if it were objective reality. Even the smallest interactions are invaded. A neutral glance becomes a story of judgment. A delayed response becomes evidence of rejection. A chance comment becomes proof of inadequacy. The mind constructs an entire universe in which you are perpetually at risk, constantly insufficient, always reacting. And most people obey these illusions without ever noticing the deception. The liberation is simple, yet profound. Once you notice the projections, once you witness the stories your mind tells about others and the external world, the authority of those illusions begins to weaken. You stop reacting automatically. You question assumptions. You refuse to obey stories that are not fact. The world, once hostile, judgmental, and dangerous, begins to feel neutral. Opportunities expand. Fear diminishes. Freedom begins to seep into experience. But even this revelation only scratches the surface. The mind does not stop with projecting social realities. It projects entire narratives about life itself, about the trajectory of your existence, about success, failure, health, and possibility. It orchestrates scenarios of limitation that are so convincing they shape the future through fear, avoidance, and hesitation. The world you experience is not just interpreted, it is co-created by thought. The next layer goes even deeper, how the mind hijacks perception of time, creating illusions of inevitability, shaping expectation, and enslaving behavior before reality has a chance to occur. Once you see this, the control the mind has exercised over every interaction, every choice, and every moment of your life becomes staggering.
Chapter 7. The Tyranny of Time. Your mind does not merely interpret reality, it enslaves you to an imagined future. Every anticipation, every projection, every rehearsal of what might happen controls your behavior as if it were already happening. Time in the mind is not neutral. It is a weapon, a prison, a relentless executioner. The past dictates identity. The present is filtered through fear, and the future is preemptively rehearsed as catastrophe or limitation. You are living in timelines manufactured by thought, not in the reality of what actually exists. Imagine waking up and immediately rehearsing failure before a single decision is made. A meeting looms, a conversation awaits, a challenge approaches, and your body, mind, and attention are already consumed by an event that has not yet occurred. The heart races, muscles tighten, focus narrows, and energy constricts. Every instinct, every action, every micro-movement is hijacked by imagined time. You live as if the future has already arrived, and you obey its invisible commands. The mind cannot distinguish between anticipation and reality. A vividly imagined disaster triggers the same neural pathways, the same stress responses, the same emotional intensity as an actual catastrophe. Anxiety, fear, hesitation, doubt, they are all produced in the now, yet they originate from what does not exist. The mind manufactures timelines that do not exist, yet the body and behavior respond as if they are absolute truth. Consider Sarah. Paralyzed by fear of an upcoming presentation, she had rehearsed failure for weeks. Every imagined mistake triggered tension in her shoulders, nausea in her stomach, a racing heart, shallow breathing. The audience, reality itself, had not yet arrived, yet her mind had already rewritten history, orchestrated the experience, and hijacked the body to obey an illusion. She was trapped, not by circumstance, but by anticipation, the tyranny of time as constructed by thought. The mind's projection of the future is always selective, biased, and self-reinforcing. It amplifies threat, exaggerates limitation, and minimizes possibility. Positive outcomes are ignored, success is discounted, potential is preemptively invalidated. Humans consistently overestimate failure and underestimate opportunity. Every imagined obstacle becomes a barrier. Every rehearsal of disaster strengthens the chains. The body, emotions, and choices are aligned with fear before reality can offer evidence to the contrary. Even subtle anticipations are enough to hijack life. A glance, a sound, a thought about tomorrow or next week can trigger hours of tension, dozens of decisions filtered through imagined constraints, and an entire day shaped by events that may never occur. Life becomes a rehearsal of fear rather than a direct experience of possibility. Every moment of anticipation is a micro-prison, a preemptive limit, a rehearsal of surrender. Yet recognition changes everything. When you observe the tyranny of time, when you notice that the future you fear is a fabrication, authority shifts. Awareness creates a space between thought and reaction. The body begins to release tension. Breath slows. Heart rate stabilizes. Focus returns. Choices can be made from reality rather than imagination. The illusion of inevitability dissolves, revealing a landscape of possibility that had always existed, but had been hidden behind the mind's projections. The tyranny of time is profound because it extends beyond fear. It shapes ambition, limits creativity, and dictates identity. Every goal deferred, every dream postponed, every risk avoided is filtered through projections of failure. Every imagined limitation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The mind does not merely predict the future, it co-creates it, enslaving the present to imagined outcomes that may never exist. And yet, this is only the beginning. Time itself is malleable. Past, present, and future are manipulated by thought to reinforce identity, control perception, and shape behavior. The mind projects limitation forward, reconstructs memory backward, and controls the present through anticipation. Every decision, every hesitation, every emotion is enslaved by these invisible narratives. The next revelation will go even deeper, how thought manipulates memory, reconstructs identity, and engineers belief so that you obey without ever questioning. The mind does not simply project fear into the future, it rewrites the past, aligns perception, and ensures compliance in the present. Once you see this, the scale of the mind's dominion and the potential for liberation becomes staggering.
Chapter 8. Memory and Identity Under Siege. Your mind does not merely create illusions of the future. It rewrites the past. Every memory you trust is filtered, edited, and reconstructed to fit a narrative your mind has been rehearsing for years. Events are not recorded objectively. They are recalled selectively, amplified, diminished, or altered to reinforce identity, justify fear, or sustain limitation. You believe in a coherent self, but that self is largely a story built from reconstructed memory. Imagine recalling a childhood failure. The embarrassment, the shame, the humiliation, each detail intensified, replayed with emotional exaggeration. Perhaps the event was minor, forgotten by others, but the mind reconstructs it as monumental, as proof of inadequacy. Every subsequent action, every hesitation, every choice is filtered through this reconstructed memory, reinforcing the self that suffers, the identity that fears, the narrative that limits. Memory becomes a tool of control, a chain binding the present to imagined restriction. Consider how identity is manufactured through repetition. Daily thoughts, repeated judgments, and rehearsed narratives crystallize into a self-concept. I am not enough. I always fail. I cannot trust others. These statements are not truths. They are patterns reinforced through memory, imagination, and repetition until the body, the emotions, and the behavior obey them as though they are fact. Every action aligns with the story of the self, every opportunity filtered through the lens of past limitations. You are not living from reality. You are living from a reconstruction of yourself that is, in large part, imagined. Even perception of others is warped by these reconstructions. Memory filters interactions, highlights perceived slights, and omits supportive signals. A friend's encouragement is forgotten, a compliment dismissed, while every misstep, every criticism, every ambiguous remark is magnified, rehearsed, and stored as evidence. Relationships, opportunity, and social dynamics are thus hijacked by memory, creating a self-fulfilling loop where limitation and fear appear to be objective when they are entirely manufactured. The physiological consequences are staggering. Replayed memories trigger stress responses identical to the original experience. Heart rate spikes, muscles tighten, digestion stalls, energy wanes. Emotional suffering is amplified not by reality, but by reconstruction. Decades of repeated mental rehearsals accumulate into chronic tension, anxiety, and self-doubt, each reinforcing the story that you have never questioned. History is filled with lives imprisoned by reconstructed identity. Artists abandon masterpieces because past failures were magnified beyond reality. Leaders froze in moments of indecision because imagined betrayals and errors were overrepresented in memory. Entrepreneurs avoided risks because previous setbacks were replayed as catastrophic inevitabilities. The illusion of self, cemented by memory, governs decisions, behaviors, and destiny with invisible authority. Yet, awareness begins liberation. Observing that memory is reconstruction, not fact, weakens its grip. When the mind's edits are witnessed, emotional intensity diminishes, physiological responses ease, and choices can be made based on reality rather than rehearsal. The self, once unquestioned, becomes pliable. The body, once enslaved to old narratives, can release tension. Emotions, once hijacked by replayed failures, stabilize. The past loses its power to dominate the present. But even recognition of memory's malleability only exposes another layer. Identity itself is not fixed. The I you defend, the self you believe defines your experience, is a product of thought patterns, projections, and reconstructions. Every belief about your ability, worth, and potential is filtered through these manufactured narratives. The mind's construction is so seamless, so convincing, that the illusion of permanence feels undeniable. You obey it without question. You surrender to limitations you inherited from thought, not fact. The next chapter will go even deeper, showing how the mind manipulates perception of potential, authority, and freedom itself, embedding invisible limits that govern behavior, ambition, and choice. Once you see how these constraints are fabricated, the scale of control and the magnitude of liberation becomes staggering. Chapter 9: The Invisible Barriers. Most of the limitations you experience are not external. They do not exist in reality. They are invisible barriers, meticulously constructed by thought, reinforced by memory, rehearsed by anticipation, and obeyed by the body without question. Every hesitation, every missed opportunity, every retreat from action is not imposed by circumstance. It is manufactured internally. The mind designs constraints so convincing that they feel real, immutable, and unavoidable. Imagine standing at the edge of a decision that could transform your life. The opportunity is tangible, accessible, even desirable. Yet before you act, the mind generates objections, fear of failure, doubt about ability, imagined judgment from others, projection of catastrophe. These objections do not originate in reality. They are rehearsed narratives, projected timelines, and reconstructed memories combined into a persuasive illusion. You obey these internal constructs as if they were laws of the universe, surrendering to a prison of your own creation. The mechanisms are subtle but relentless. Thoughts trigger emotional responses. Emotional responses trigger physiological responses. The body tenses, posture collapses, breath constricts, focus narrows. Every instinct is hijacked. Energy is rerouted into defense and avoidance rather than creation and exploration. Decisions are filtered through imagined limitations. Actions align with fear rather than possibility. Every invisible barrier is self-reinforcing. The illusion becomes reality because the body and behavior obey it. Consider John, a talented entrepreneur paralyzed by imagined failure. He had clear strategies, viable opportunities, and the skills to succeed. Yet his mind produced endless barriers. I am not ready. What if they reject me? I might lose everything. Each thought generated tension, anxiety, and hesitation, shaping his behavior to avoid risk. Reality offered no constraints, yet he acted as if the barriers were solid walls. The mind had created a prison stronger than any external obstacle. These invisible barriers are often reinforced socially. Cultural expectations, familial pressure, and peer assumptions amplify imagined limitations. The mind interprets them as fact, embedding constraints deeper. Every interaction, every judgment, every comparison is filtered through these narratives, reinforcing the illusion of limitation. Freedom, opportunity, and potential are surrendered before they are even attempted. Even subtle barriers accumulate over time. A single hesitation repeated daily becomes habitual. Repeated avoidance crystallizes into identity. I am cautious. I cannot take risks. I am not capable. These invisible walls shape life direction, relationships, and ambition, steering behavior along paths dictated by thought, not reality. Decades pass not because of external limits, but because the mind's projections have been obeyed relentlessly. The physiological cost is staggering. Chronic tension, shallow breathing, elevated stress hormones, restricted movement, and compromised health become the byproducts of internal prisons. Emotional suffering, frustration, and self-doubt accumulate, reinforcing the illusion of limitation. Every barrier obeyed strengthens the narrative. Every opportunity avoided validates the fiction. You are trapped in a reality that does not exist, obeying laws your mind wrote without your consent. Recognition is liberation.
Observing these barriers as creations, not facts, begins to dissolve them. Awareness interrupts the automatic obedience of thought. Tension releases, breath deepens, focus clears. Decisions emerge from clarity rather than fear. Opportunities once blocked become visible. Action aligns with possibility. The invisible walls, so formidable, begin to crumble when you refuse to obey the story that created them. Yet even this awakening reveals an even deeper layer. The mind does not only construct barriers to action, it engineers limits to perception, authority, and freedom itself. It dictates what you believe is possible, reshaping reality to match expectation. The illusions that govern choice, creativity, ambition, and influence are interwoven so tightly into experience that liberation demands not only recognition, but radical recalibration of thought itself. The next revelation will pull back the curtain further, exposing how the mind manipulates perception of power, authority, and potential, embedding invisible constraints on what you believe you can achieve. Once you see these constraints, the scale of influence the mind has exercised and the magnitude of freedom available is almost incomprehensible.
Chapter 10. The Mind's Grip on Power. Power is not just external, it is internal, sculpted and constrained by thought. The mind convinces you that authority, mastery, and influence are determined by circumstance, talent, or external validation. Yet the reality is far more profound. Every limitation you perceive in your ability to act, create, or lead is manufactured internally, embedded in the architecture of thought, reinforced by memory, and obeyed by the body as if indisputable. The mind dictates who you believe you can be, what you believe you can achieve, and how far you believe you can go. Imagine holding the keys to your own freedom, yet perceiving them as beyond reach. Every opportunity for mastery is filtered through projections of inadequacy, fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of exposure. Each imagined barrier triggers physiological responses: tension, shallow breathing, tightened muscles, racing heartbeat. Energy is rerouted into caution rather than creation, hesitation rather than action. The illusion of limitation becomes tangible, and obedience to it reinforces the narrative. You act as if the constraints are real, and the mind, invisible yet omnipotent, ensures they dominate your life. Consider Maria, a brilliant strategist whose insights could transform her organization. Every suggestion she made was filtered through internal doubt. What if they reject me? Am I really competent enough? Will they see through me? Her mind projected potential failures so convincingly that she hesitated, deferred, and second-guessed every contribution. Authority, influence, and recognition were available, yet inaccessible because the mind's grip on power had convinced her they were not. The world itself did not impose limits. The self-imposed barriers orchestrated by thought were absolute. The mind's control over perceived authority is subtle but relentless. It manufactures scarcity where abundance exists. It magnifies competition, diminishes potential, and rewrites internal narratives to align with fear. Every rejection imagined, every failure rehearsed, every limitation internalized reinforces obedience to a self-constructed hierarchy of inability. Opportunities are passed over. Talent remains dormant. Influence goes unrealized. You obey a structure that exists entirely in the imagination, yet feels irrefutable. The physiological and emotional consequences are staggering. Chronic stress, suppressed creativity, eroded confidence, and constrained energy are the inevitable byproducts of mind-enforced limitation. Every decision aligned with imagined incapacity, every hesitation, every moment of self-doubt reinforces the internal architecture of control. You live not from capability, but from a series of obedient reactions to imagined authority. The body, mind, and emotions are enslaved by invisible laws authored by thought. Yet observation fractures the grip. When you notice that authority, power, and mastery are constructs interpreted through thought, the illusion begins to dissolve. Awareness creates space between perception and reaction. The mind's narratives lose immediacy. Energy returns, confidence emerges, action aligns with capability rather than fear. Every opportunity that was once filtered through limitation becomes available when the mind's grip is recognized and released. Even recognition, however, is only the beginning. The mind does not stop at controlling perception of potential. It shapes belief, expectation, and even creativity itself. Every story of what you can achieve, every boundary of possibility, every standard of competence is influenced by thought patterns that have been reinforced over decades. Authority is not just external, it is a self-constructed experience that governs how far you move, how boldly you act, and how fully you live. The next revelation will show the ultimate mechanism of mind control, how thought shapes reality itself, not just perception, memory, or potential. It orchestrates choices, designs experiences, and engineers the life you inhabit before you even recognize the influence. Once you understand this, the scale of the mind's dominion and the magnitude of liberation available becomes staggering. Chapter 11. Thought as Reality. Every moment of your life is filtered, edited, and shaped by thought. Yet the mind does more than interpret. It engineers reality itself. What you perceive as external circumstance, chance, or inevitability is often a mirror of internal projections, reinforced by belief, memory, and repeated imagination. The life you inhabit is not neutral. It is the consequence of obedient thoughts acted upon unconsciously. Imagine perceiving limitation where none exists, a blank page in front of you, an opportunity awaiting action, a conversation ready to unfold, yet hesitation grips, energy drains, and insight stalls. The mind has created a reality consistent with internal narratives of fear, inadequacy, or expectation. Your actions align with thought, and the world rearranges itself to match projections. Opportunity, abundance, and possibility exist, yet obedience to imagined constraints ensures they remain unrealized. Consider Daniel, a writer whose ideas could shift perspectives globally. Each day, before the first word was written, fear of inadequacy filled his mind. This will never be good enough. What if nobody understands? I'm too inexperienced. The manuscript, blank and pure, became a reflection of internal hesitation. Thoughts dictated his output, dictated opportunity, and dictated reality itself. The world responded to the energy he projected. Uncertainty manifested as delay, doubt as omission, limitation as absence. Reality was being authored by his own mind. The mind engineers reality with invisible precision. Thoughts trigger emotions. Emotions trigger energy allocation. Energy allocation shapes action, and action constructs experience. Every relationship, every career path, every moment of creation is co-authored by thought and obedience.
Repeated projections of limitation produce avoidance, self-sabotage, and delayed opportunity. Rehearsals of failure ensure alignment with imagined catastrophe. Life unfolds as a reflection of internal narratives until recognition interrupts the cycle. Even subtle thought patterns orchestrate outcomes. A glance, a tone of voice, a fleeting interpretation of an event can shift attention, intention, and action, producing ripple effects that realign external circumstance. The mind, operating unconsciously, constructs narratives that are obeyed biologically, emotionally, and behaviorally. You are simultaneously architect, prisoner, and executor of the reality you inhabit. Physiologically, the effects are profound. Chronic tension, constrained creativity, stress hormone elevation, and diminished energy follow obedient thoughts. Cognitive biases amplify perceived limitation. Emotional reactions reinforce narrative consistency. Every micro-decision, every glance, every hesitation is filtered through projection, and the world conforms accordingly. Life is not random. It is co-created, moment by moment, thought by thought, rehearsal by rehearsal. Observation changes everything. Witnessing that thought constructs reality fractures authority. Awareness interrupts automatic obedience. Energy reallocates toward possibility. Perception expands. Decisions align with opportunity rather than limitation. Action flows from capability rather than anticipation. The reality you inhabit begins to shift once recognition of thought's creative power is established. Yet even recognition is only the threshold. The mind does not stop at creating reality for survival or limitation. It engineers belief, expectation, and potential. It manipulates perception of authority, power, relationships, and personal freedom. The scope of influence is staggering, encompassing every moment, every interaction, and every choice. Obedience to thought can manifest as wealth, freedom, creativity, or conversely as fear, scarcity, hesitation, and constraint. The next revelation will expose the ultimate truth, how the mind creates entire worlds within and around you, governing not just potential or action, but the experience of life itself. Once you understand this, the magnitude of liberation, the scale of agency, and the scope of freedom available becomes incomprehensible.
Chapter 12. The Architecture of Experience. Every experience you have ever had, every interaction, every emotion, every success, and every failure has been filtered, shaped, and orchestrated by thought. Your mind does not merely interpret reality, it constructs it. It designs your world in real time, assembling perception, memory, anticipation, and action into a seamless experience that feels inevitable. Life itself is a canvas, and thought is the unseen brushstroke that paints every line, shadow, and hue. Imagine walking into a room filled with opportunity. The environment is neutral. The potential exists, yet perception filters it through fear, expectation, or limitation. Every glance, every word, every subtle cue is interpreted according to narratives the mind has rehearsed for decades. Action is dictated not by circumstance, but by obedience to thought. Opportunity remains unrealized. Freedom remains latent, and potential waits silently while the mind orchestrates a reality of its own design. Consider Marcus, an innovator on the brink of a breakthrough. His concept had the power to transform industries, yet each day he rehearsed failure before taking action. What if it doesn't work? What if they laugh? What if I am exposed? These thoughts triggered tension, constricted his focus, and drained energy. His body, mind, and attention obeyed projections, and the breakthrough stalled. Reality itself had not refused him. It was his mind, crafting experience according to imagined limitation that blocked access to success. The mind engineers experience with intricate precision. Thoughts generate emotion. Emotion triggers physiological response. The body acts. Actions shape outcomes. Outcomes reinforce beliefs. Beliefs reshape perception. Every experience, from the trivial to the monumental, follows this cycle. The illusion of external cause obscures the internal architect, making life appear reactive when it is fundamentally co-created by thought. Life itself is a canvas, and thought is the unseen brushstroke that paints every line, shadow, and hue. Even subtle patterns influence the trajectory of life. A fleeting fear of judgment alters posture, tone, and expression, subtly shifting interactions. A minor assumption about scarcity redirects attention away from opportunity. A habitual interpretation of events as threatening reinforces anxiety, shapes relationships, and constrains action. The mind constructs invisible frameworks around potential, dictating the experience of reality moment by moment, often without awareness. The physiological impact is undeniable. Chronic stress, muscular tension, shallow breathing, depleted energy, and diminished creativity are manifestations of the mind's architecture imposed upon the body. Emotions oscillate according to narratives. Actions align with projections, and the world reshapes itself to match internal expectation. Life feels inevitable, yet it is authored continuously by thought, filtered through identity, memory, and anticipation. Observation is liberation. Recognizing that thought designs experience fractures automatic obedience. Awareness opens space between perception and reaction. Energy returns to creativity and action. Attention shifts from limitation to possibility. Every opportunity, every interaction, every moment of potential becomes accessible when the mind's designs are recognized and consciously engaged. Yet, even awareness does not fully capture the depth of control. Thought does not only shape immediate experience, it constructs entire frameworks of expectation, meaning, and possibility. Authority, freedom, potential, and self-mastery are all filtered, constrained, and amplified according to narratives the mind has rehearsed. The invisible architecture dictates the experience of life itself. The next chapter will push beyond perception and experience to reveal the ultimate freedom: how to observe, dismantle, and rewrite the mental frameworks that govern identity, reality, and destiny. Once understood, this knowledge allows complete liberation from limitation, granting access to an unprecedented level of agency, creativity, and mastery over life itself.
Chapter 13. Rewriting the Framework. Everything you have believed about yourself, about life, and about the world is the result of patterns, habits, and stories constructed by thought over decades. These mental frameworks shape perception, filter memory, and orchestrate behavior with invisible authority. They dictate what you notice, what you ignore, what you pursue, and what you avoid. Every decision, every hesitation, every interaction is influenced by a structure most people never see, never question, and never touch. Yet these frameworks are not permanent. They are malleable, subject to observation, intervention, and deliberate reconstruction. Imagine a life where fear does not dictate action, where doubt does not cloud judgment, where limitation is no longer internalized. This life is not distant. It exists on the other side of recognition. To access it, the invisible frameworks must first be illuminated. Observation is the starting point. Every thought, every projection, every rehearsal must be witnessed without judgment. The mind's automatic authority must be interrupted, its habitual patterns exposed, its invisible influence acknowledged. Once illuminated, the frameworks lose the power to command silently. Awareness fractures obedience. Consider Elena, an artist who had been paralyzed by perfectionism. Every blank canvas became a battleground. Every idea was judged. Every stroke filtered through fear of failure. Every attempt preemptively sabotaged by imagined inadequacy. Her reality was designed by frameworks she did not recognize, constructed from repeated internal narratives of insufficiency.
When she began observing these structures, every thought and every hesitation became data, not command. She began noticing patterns of self-doubt, projections of criticism, rehearsals of failure, and the illusions dictating her choices. Awareness disrupted authority, and creativity began to flow. Once observation occurs, reconstruction begins. The frameworks are not destroyed, they are rewritten. Limiting beliefs are replaced with expansive possibilities. Fear-based narratives are substituted with curiosity and experimentation. Identity itself is redesigned to align with freedom, capability, and potential rather than fear, limitation, and projection. The mind, once a rigid architect of constraint, becomes a co-creator of opportunity, mastery, and expansive experience. The process is precise. Every projection of fear must be observed, acknowledged, and deliberately deconstructed. Every memory that has been reconstructed to justify limitation must be reinterpreted with neutrality. Every expectation, assumption, and preemptive judgment must be questioned for validity. Action must then align with reconstructed frameworks rather than habitual obedience to old authority. The results are profound. Decisions become fluid, creativity becomes boundless, and perception of reality expands beyond previous confinement. Physiological changes mirror the mental shift. Chronic tension releases. Breath deepens. Posture aligns with confidence. Energy surges, and focus sharpens. Emotional stability increases as the body no longer obeys rehearsed limitation. Behavior begins to match potential rather than projection. Life itself responds to rewritten frameworks because the mind's influence over perception, expectation, and choice has been consciously engaged. Even subtle rewrites amplify outcomes exponentially. Small adjustments to how the mind interprets authority, limitation, and opportunity ripple through behavior, relationships, and circumstance. Opportunities that were once invisible become apparent. Risk is no longer paralyzing, but energizing. Creativity flows without hesitation. Identity, freed from self-imposed restrictions, becomes expansive, adaptable, and aligned with purpose rather than fear, limitation, and projection. Yet this is not the final revelation. Awareness and reconstruction expose another, deeper mechanism. The mind does not only construct frameworks to constrain, it also programs perception of freedom itself. Every experience of possibility, mastery, and agency is shaped, filtered, and made subject to obedience unless consciously observed and rewritten. Complete liberation requires not only reconstruction, but continual engagement, awareness, and refinement of the frameworks that govern thought, perception, and action. The next chapter will reveal the ultimate principle of mastery: how to continuously observe, dismantle, and rewrite mental frameworks so that life is no longer governed by projection, fear, or habit, but fully co-created by conscious attention, deliberate choice, and expansive thought. Once understood, the degree of freedom, creativity, and influence available is almost unimaginable.
Chapter 14. Mastery of Mental Frameworks. Observation and reconstruction alone do not create lasting transformation. The mind, deeply habituated, constantly attempts to revert to old patterns, old narratives, and habitual obedience. True mastery arises not from a single act of recognition, but from sustained engagement with thought itself, from a continuous process of observation, dismantling, and deliberate rewriting. Every moment of life becomes both an opportunity and a test, a canvas upon which freedom, agency, and potential are exercised and reinforced. Imagine a mind that no longer accepts limitation as fact, a mind that witnesses fear and doubt without capitulation, a mind that engages the world intentionally rather than reactively. This is not hypothetical. Every habit, every projection, every rehearsed narrative can be consciously observed and rewritten. The mind, once the invisible architect of constraint, becomes a tool of unprecedented creation.
Authority, influence, creativity, and choice expand exponentially when obedience to fear is replaced with engagement and awareness. Consider Adrian, a strategist who had been confined by both fear of failure and excessive self-criticism. Each decision had been filtered through projection, every risk magnified, every opportunity minimized. Life had become a pattern of hesitation, compromise, and invisible limitation. With sustained observation, he began to notice recurring frameworks, patterns of avoidance, self-sabotage, and imagined limitation. Once recognized, these frameworks could be deliberately dismantled and rewritten. Action aligned with observation, choice replaced projection, and perception expanded. Every decision became an experiment in freedom, every challenge an opportunity to reinforce agency. Mastery requires vigilance. Every thought is a potential architect of experience. Every memory, every anticipation, every projection carries the capacity to constrain or liberate. Awareness is not intermittent. It must be sustained. Observation must be continuous. Mental frameworks, once rewritten, are only stable to the extent that they are actively maintained. Habitual thought will attempt to restore old patterns unless attention is applied. The mind must be treated as an evolving system, not a static entity. Physiologically, mastery manifests as energy, clarity, and alignment. Tension dissolves, focus sharpens, intuition heightens, and action becomes effortless. Emotional responses align with potential rather than projection. Creativity surges as the mind no longer rehearses failure. The body, once enslaved to imagined limitations, now moves with coordination, confidence, and adaptability. Behavior becomes consistent with capability rather than fear. Perception expands beyond habitual constraints, and life begins to respond to conscious design rather than unconscious obedience. Even subtle engagement with frameworks produces exponential results. Adjusting perception of authority shifts influence. Reinterpreting memory expands identity. Rewriting projections reshapes reality. The feedback loop becomes positive. Conscious engagement produces action aligned with potential. Action reinforces observation. Observation informs further rewriting. Mastery is iterative, cumulative, and compounding. Yet the deepest power lies in the ability to preemptively shape frameworks. Rather than waiting for fear, doubt, or limitation to appear, the mind can be trained to anticipate projection, to intercept narrative before it crystallizes, and to choose alignment with freedom, capability, and expansive possibility. Life becomes proactive, not reactive. Every interaction, every opportunity, every challenge is engaged intentionally, creating cascading effects of agency, creativity, and influence. The next chapter will ascend even higher, showing how thought, observation, and framework mastery allow direct influence over not only experience, but potential itself. It reveals how life, once seen as reactive and constrained, can be fully co-created moment by moment, thought by thought, choice by choice. The magnitude of freedom and influence attainable through mastery of mental frameworks becomes almost limitless. Chapter 15: Co-creating reality. The most profound freedom emerges when thought ceases to be a mere observer of life and becomes the instrument of creation. The mind, once a silent architect of limitation, transforms into a deliberate engineer of experience. Every decision, perception, and projection begins to shape reality itself. Life no longer happens to you. It unfolds as a reflection of conscious design, a mirror of intentional thought applied with precision. Imagine entering any environment, any interaction, any challenge, fully aware of your internal frameworks and fully engaged with their orchestration. The subtle energy of observation, choice, and intentional projection aligns perception, action, and outcome. Fear no longer dictates movement. Hesitation dissolves. Limitation fades. Opportunity emerges not by chance, but by the deliberate alignment of thought and behavior. Every moment is a co-creation of potential realized, possibilities expanded, and influence exercised. Consider Leela, a researcher whose potential had been constrained by habitual doubt and internalized criticism. Every experiment, every presentation, every collaboration was filtered through projections of inadequacy. Life unfolded in partial realization, brilliance dimmed by fear. Once she began to engage thought deliberately, observing internal narratives, dismantling old frameworks, and projecting alignment with capability and mastery, the transformation was immediate and compounding. Ideas flowed without obstruction. Opportunities emerged in patterns previously invisible. Influence expanded as perception and action aligned. Her reality became a direct product of conscious co-creation rather than passive experience. The mechanics are precise. Awareness intercepts habitual thought before it dictates behavior. Frameworks are continuously observed and recalibrated. Every projection of limitation is identified, acknowledged, and redirected toward expansive potential. Action is taken in alignment with observation, intention, and projection. The feedback loop is instantaneous. Conscious thought shapes behavior, behavior shapes environment, environment reinforces deliberate perception, perception informs further deliberate thought. Reality itself becomes responsive, fluid, and malleable. Physiologically, this transformation transforms the body as well. Energy flows without obstruction. Posture aligns with confidence and purpose. Breath deepens and stabilizes emotional state. Focus sharpens, intuition heightens, and creativity surges. The mind-body system, once hijacked by fear and limitation, now operates as a unified instrument of influence and possibility. Every interaction, every opportunity, every challenge is engaged from a place of clarity, capability, and agency. Even subtle mastery magnifies outcomes exponentially. A small shift in internal projection alters behavior, perception, and response. A minor recalibration of expectation expands opportunity. A brief interruption of habitual doubt realigns trajectory. The mind, once passive, becomes a powerful lens, shaping every facet of experience with intentionality. Life responds because obedience to fear and projection is replaced with alignment to observation and deliberate action. Yet, the ultimate freedom lies in continuous engagement. Co-creation is not a single act, it is a sustained practice of observation, recalibration, and projection. Every moment, from minor decisions to major life choices, is an opportunity to reinforce alignment with potential rather than limitation. Influence expands, creativity flows, relationships deepen, and perception of opportunity becomes limitless. Life becomes a canvas, thought becomes brushstroke, and reality transforms into a direct reflection of intentional engagement. The next chapter will ascend even further, showing how co-creation extends beyond personal reality to influence collective experience, environment, and systemic outcomes. Once fully realized, the power to shape life and environment moment by moment becomes exponential, revealing freedom, influence, and potential at a scale most people never imagine. Listen, if this audiobook gave you even one powerful idea, don't just stop here. Hit subscribe right now, tap like, and share it with one person who needs this. Your growth and theirs starts with this click. Chapter 16. Expanding Influence. Co-creation is not confined to the private world of thought and personal experience. It extends outward, shaping environment, relationships, and the systems that surround you. Every interaction, every decision, every projection of energy ripples outward, influencing collective dynamics with a precision that is invisible to most, yet palpable in effect. Mastery of thought transforms not only personal reality, but the context in which that reality unfolds. Imagine standing in a room and feeling the energy shift before a word is spoken, a decision is made, or subtle gesture is executed. The mind, aligned with observation, clarity, and deliberate intention, projects influence that the external world obeys. Perception,
behavior, and even emotion in others respond to calibrated energy. Influence becomes a force field, emanating from presence, projection, and deliberate engagement, restructuring dynamics silently, effortlessly, and powerfully. Consider Samuel, a leader whose teams consistently underperformed despite strategy and resources. The obstacle was not circumstance, it was influence filtered through misaligned thought. He began to observe the frameworks guiding his perception, calibrating responses to interaction, projecting confidence and clarity, and reinforcing patterns aligned with capability rather than limitation. The transformation was immediate. Collaboration intensified, initiative increased, and alignment expanded beyond his personal action into systemic influence. Thought, deliberately engaged, reshaped entire environments. The mechanism is intricate. Thought shapes perception, perception shapes behavior, behavior shapes circumstance, and circumstance reinforces influence. Every projection of confidence, every subtle calibration of expectation, every observation of response compounds. Influence expands exponentially because the mind orchestrates subtle cues that ripple across networks, magnifying the effect of deliberate thought. Awareness allows anticipation of reactions, recognition of patterns, and redirection of outcomes before inertia or habitual limitation takes hold. Physiological synchronization enhances the effect. Presence emanates authority and alignment. Gestures, tone, posture, and breath resonate with intentional projection. Emotional regulation amplifies influence as clarity flows through behavior. Others respond not to directives, but to the energy of alignment and coherent projection. Reality bends toward intentional design because observation, thought, and behavior converge seamlessly into actionable influence. Even micro-adjustments produce compounding effects. A shift in perception alters response, a subtle calibration of energy amplifies engagement, a nuanced expression reinforces alignment across networks. The mind, once internalized and passive, becomes a dynamic force interacting with complex systems. Every interaction is an opportunity for co-creation, every response a feedback loop, and every projection a lever of influence. Yet the ultimate realization is systemic. Influence is not limited to immediate perception or personal interaction. It extends into patterns, environments, and collective behavior. The mind, trained in observation and mastery, orchestrates reality with precision, aligning internal frameworks to external dynamics. The magnitude of impact is exponential, moving from personal experience to environmental modulation to collective alignment. Presence, thought, and projection intersect to reshape context and opportunity. The next chapter will reveal the final, most profound stage: how mastery of thought, frameworks, and projection transcends individual and collective influence, granting access to unprecedented levels of freedom, agency, and the creation of outcomes that most minds cannot perceive. Once fully realized, the capacity to co-create personal, collective, and systemic reality becomes limitless.
Chapter 17. The Pinnacle of Influence. At the highest level of mastery, thought is no longer a private instrument. It becomes a force that orchestrates both internal and external reality simultaneously. Every perception, every decision, every projection is calibrated with precision, producing effects that resonate across personal experience, relationships, environment, and even broader systems. Influence at this level is invisible yet undeniable, subtle yet transformative, immediate yet compounding across time and space. Imagine stepping into any situation and feeling the flow of possibility respond to intention before a single word is uttered. Energy, focus, and presence align in such a way that outcomes bend toward design. Obstacles are observed, not reacted to, and potential becomes visible even before it exists in action. The mind, fully engaged, anticipates, adapts, and guides reality with the precision of an architect manipulating the very structure of possibility. Consider Naomi, a strategist whose work had been limited by the habitual reactions of her team and by the inertia of organizational structure. Once she mastered observation, framework rewiring, and projection of influence, her impact multiplied. Decisions previously delayed were executed decisively. Collaboration aligned across departments effortlessly. Challenges became opportunities as patterns of limitation dissolved under deliberate orchestration. Her presence altered the dynamics of meetings, negotiations, and strategy execution. Influence, once fragmented and reactive, became holistic and self-reinforcing. The mechanics of mastery are exacting. Thought generates projection. Projection influences perception. Perception directs action. Action reshapes circumstance. Circumstance reinforces projection. Each layer compounds the next, producing exponential outcomes. Mastery requires continuous awareness, calibration of frameworks, and deliberate projection into every interaction. Observation alone is insufficient. It is the combination of observation, engagement, and projection that allows reality itself to bend toward intention. Physiologically, mastery manifests as resonance. Presence radiates coherence. Breath, posture, and gesture align with intention. Emotional regulation allows focus to move unhindered by projection of limitation. Creativity flows with unbroken continuity. Actions become synchronized with potential rather than constrained by fear. The mind-body system operates as a single instrument of influence, capable of shaping outcomes beyond immediate perception. Even micro-adjustments create vast ripple effects. A shift in anticipation changes responses across networks. Subtle calibration of energy aligns collaboration, opportunity, and action. Each conscious choice amplifies projection, which informs subsequent perception, producing cascading influence. Mastery at this level turns interaction into co-creation, turning thought into leverage, and turning presence into structural force within reality itself. Yet the deepest level of mastery is not confined to personal or collective influence. It extends into the architecture of potential itself. The mind, fully calibrated and aware, can orchestrate not only what is experienced, but what becomes possible. Potential, previously latent or hidden, becomes tangible. Opportunities emerge in alignment with deliberate design. Outcomes are no longer constrained by previous limitations because the frameworks governing limitation have been rewritten, observed, and projected outward with precision. The next chapter will reveal the ultimate realization: the integration of thought, framework mastery, projection, and systemic influence into continuous creation. At this stage, freedom, agency, and power are fully aligned. Every interaction, every decision, every thought, and every moment becomes an opportunity to shape reality, influence systems, and expand potential in ways most minds cannot comprehend. The culmination approaches where mastery transcends ordinary perception and enters the realm of limitless creation.
Chapter 18: Continuous Creation. At the pinnacle of mastery, life ceases to be a sequence of reactions and begins to unfold as an ongoing act of creation. Every thought, every perception, every subtle projection of energy becomes a deliberate stroke shaping reality in real time. Observation, framework mastery, and influence converge into continuous creation, producing outcomes that are fluid, dynamic, and aligned with potential rather than limitation. Life becomes a canvas, and consciousness moves like a brush, painting with precision and intentionality. Imagine standing in a complex network of interactions, decisions, and challenges, yet moving with total coherence. Every event, every response, every projection aligns with internal frameworks that have been rewritten for freedom, clarity, and potential. Past limitations dissolve into irrelevance. Hesitation no longer dictates action. Opportunity, previously invisible, emerges in patterns that are anticipated, guided, and amplified by deliberate thought. The mind operates as both architect and executor, designing, testing, and refining reality simultaneously. Consider Elias, a visionary whose influence had been constrained by habitual doubt and reactive decision-making. Every choice had been filtered through fear, every interaction had been constrained by assumption, and every outcome reflected internal projections rather than potential. With mastery of observation, frameworks, and projection, Elias transformed the invisible architecture of influence. Decisions became intuitive yet precise. Energy flowed without obstruction. Actions aligned perfectly with purpose. His personal reality expanded, his network responded with coherence, and his environment reshaped itself in alignment with deliberate design. Life, once fragmented, became a continuous unfolding of intentional creation. The mechanics are exacting and multidimensional. Observation intercepts unconscious thought. Rewritten frameworks guide projection. Projection shapes perception in others, informs decision-making, and aligns actions with potential. Actions transform circumstance, which reinforces influence and informs subsequent observation. Each layer compounds the previous one, producing an exponentially expanding feedback loop. Mastery is iterative, dynamic, and fluid, and continuous creation is its ultimate expression. Physiologically, mastery manifests as coherence and resonance. The body operates as an extension of mind. Posture communicates intention, breath stabilizes emotion, and energy flows unimpeded. Actions are synchronized with perception and projection, allowing interactions to unfold with effortless alignment. Creativity surges, focus sharpens, and influence amplifies. The nervous system itself responds to deliberate engagement, reinforcing confidence, clarity, and the ability to act as an instrument of continuous creation. Even subtle adjustments have compounding effects. Tiny recalibrations in thought or energy ripple through behavior, relationships, and environment. Patterns that once appeared fixed dissolve. Opportunity emerges where limitation once dominated. Every micro-decision, gesture, and projection reinforces alignment, creating a cascade of influence that expands from personal experience to collective dynamics. Mastery becomes self-sustaining, continuously generating outcomes that reflect intentional design. Yet the deepest insight is the temporal nature of creation. Continuous creation is not only about shaping present circumstances, it reshapes the trajectory of possibility itself. Every thought, every action, every projection extends influence forward in time, designing not only immediate outcomes, but long-term potential. The mind, fully engaged, becomes a temporal architect, projecting influence across seconds, minutes, hours, and years. Reality, once perceived as fixed and reactive, now bends toward design, unfolding in alignment with deliberate intention. The next chapter will reveal the ultimate stage, how this continuous creation, mastered and refined, allows complete alignment of personal, collective, and systemic influence, granting access to freedom, agency, and potential at the highest scale. Once realized, the ability to navigate, shape, and create reality moment by moment becomes limitless, producing outcomes most minds cannot conceive.
Chapter 19. Full-Scale Life Mastery. At this stage, mastery moves beyond the private sphere of thought and influence into the orchestration of entire life systems. Personal experience, relationships, environments, and long-term outcomes all converge under deliberate observation and projection.
Every moment becomes both a lever and a lens, allowing continuous alignment between internal frameworks and external reality. Life itself becomes a living reflection of consciousness in motion, a seamless interplay between intention and outcome, thought and action, energy and response. Imagine navigating the complexity of existence with perfect coherence. Every interaction, every choice, every subtle micro-expression carries purpose. Hesitation dissolves, fear becomes data, doubt becomes feedback, and every challenge is interpreted as an opportunity to reinforce alignment. The mind, once a passive processor, now orchestrates perception, projection, and influence simultaneously, creating layers of impact that ripple across personal, collective, and environmental dimensions. Life becomes both playground and laboratory, a space where potential is continuously tested, refined, and expanded. Consider Mara, whose life had been governed by reactive habits and the unobserved authority of fear. Every professional decision, social engagement, and personal goal had been filtered through frameworks she had inherited or absorbed unconsciously. Transformation began when observation became consistent, frameworks were deliberately rewritten, and projection aligned with intention rather than limitation. Subtle changes multiplied. Communication became precise, relationships deepened, opportunities expanded, and her environment responded to her presence rather than constraining it. Life, previously fragmented, became an integrated system of alignment, coherence, and influence. The mechanics are intricate, yet precise. Observation intercepts habitual thought. Rewritten frameworks guide projection. Projection shapes perception and action. Actions influence environment and systems. Environmental feedback reinforces deliberate engagement. Each layer compounds, producing outcomes that expand exponentially in scale and impact. Mastery is iterative, dynamic, and continuously self-reinforcing. Each moment of engagement strengthens the system, creating self-sustaining alignment between internal states and external reality. Physiologically, mastery manifests as effortless coherence. Breath, posture, gesture, and energy synchronize with intention. Nervous system responses are calibrated for precision rather than reaction. Emotional regulation supports clarity and focus. Energy is distributed efficiently. Creativity flows without obstruction, and every action resonates with influence and alignment. The body becomes an extension of deliberate thought, amplifying presence and enhancing the capacity to shape reality across multiple domains simultaneously. Even subtle refinements amplify outcomes exponentially. Minor recalibrations in perception, thought, or energy cascade across behavior, interactions, and environments. Patterns previously invisible emerge as predictable consequences. Micro-adjustments influence networks, opportunities, and long-term trajectories. Mastery produces compounding influence because deliberate observation and projection reinforce each other continuously, creating feedback loops that expand potential and agency. The deepest layer of mastery is temporal. Continuous creation is not limited to the immediate. Every thought, decision, and projection extends influence across time, shaping not only current circumstances, but the trajectory of potential outcomes. Life unfolds as a dynamic interplay between present action and future possibility, each decision a vector influencing both immediate results and long-term structures. Mastery of continuous creation allows one to navigate complexity with clarity, orchestrate environments with precision, and shape potential with foresight. The next chapter will reveal the final synthesis, the integration of personal mastery, systemic influence, and temporal projection into a complete framework of freedom, agency, and exponential potential. The culmination will demonstrate how every moment, every interaction, and every choice can be transformed into a deliberate act of creation, producing outcomes that transcend ordinary perception and influence life at the highest scale.
Chapter 20. The Ultimate Synthesis. At the apex of mastery, life is no longer a collection of separate domains. Thought, emotion, action, and environment converge into a single flowing continuum. Every moment becomes a point of deliberate creation. Every decision reverberates across personal experience, relationships, systems, and the trajectory of potential. Observation, framework mastery, projection, influence, and temporal foresight integrate seamlessly, producing outcomes that appear almost instantaneous, yet are grounded in cumulative precision. Reality itself bends to the deliberate engagement of consciousness, fully aligned with potential. Imagine navigating existence where hesitation does not exist, where fear is instantly observed and repurposed, where every interaction, every choice, and every environment responds to intentional projection. Past patterns, inherited assumptions, and unconscious authority dissolve completely. Life moves with coherence, energy flows without obstruction, and creativity manifests in forms previously unimaginable. Influence extends simultaneously across personal, collective, and systemic dimensions, amplifying exponentially because each layer of action reinforces all others. Consider Julian, whose potential had been fragmented by doubt, distraction, and inherited limitations. Through deliberate mastery, he observed every projection, rewrote frameworks with surgical precision, projected intention into every interaction, and aligned action with both immediate opportunity and long-term trajectory. The result was continuous creation at the highest scale. Decisions were fluid, yet precise. Collaborations became magnetized by clarity. Environments subtly shifted to support alignment, and systems responded as extensions of deliberate design. Every action multiplied impact, every moment compounded influence, and reality transformed into a dynamic reflection of consciousness, fully aligned with its highest capacity. The mechanics of ultimate synthesis are elegant and multidimensional. Observation intercepts habitual thought instantly. Frameworks are continuously calibrated. Projections shape perception in self, others, and environment. Actions cascade through networks, influencing relationships, systems, and long-term trajectories. Feedback loops amplify precision, creating exponential results. Time itself becomes a medium for creation. Every present action influences both immediate and future circumstances, producing layers of effect that magnify influence beyond ordinary perception. Physiologically, mastery manifests as effortless resonance. Breath, posture, gesture, and energy harmonize with intention. Nervous system responses are perfectly calibrated. Emotional states flow without disruption, and energy is distributed with efficiency and power. Presence communicates authority and coherence without a single word. The body becomes an instrument of creation, extending the mind's precision into action, influence, and systemic effect. Even micro-calibrations have magnified consequences. A subtle shift in perception aligns networks of relationships. A minor projection of energy restructures opportunity and influence. Every moment compounds previous alignment, producing cascading effects that extend across personal, collective, and systemic dimensions. Mastery becomes self-reinforcing. Each deliberate action strengthens frameworks, observation, projection, and influence simultaneously, producing a continuously expanding web of potential realized. The ultimate insight is integration. Personal mastery, systemic influence, temporal foresight, and continuous creation merge into a single coherent process. Thought, action, energy, and projection align perfectly. Life unfolds as a seamless continuum of deliberate creation, producing freedom, agency, and influence at a scale previously inaccessible. Every interaction, decision, and environment becomes an instrument for the continuous expansion of potential. Mastery, once scattered across domains, now exists as a singular, self-sustaining flow of creation. From this vantage, limitations are visible yet irrelevant. Challenges are opportunities magnified by awareness and alignment. Fear, doubt, and hesitation are data streams to be observed, interpreted, and repurposed. Opportunity appears in patterns previously invisible. Systems, relationships, and circumstances respond as extensions of coherent thought and deliberate action. Life is no longer experienced as reactive or fragmented. It is a continuous, flowing act of creation at the highest level. The next phase is not a single event, but a sustained state, the ongoing practice of full-spectrum mastery. Every thought, every action, every projection becomes deliberate. Every layer of influence compounds the next. Every trajectory is shaped with precision. The mind, body, and environment converge into a single instrument of creation. Every moment becomes an opportunity to extend freedom, amplify agency, and expand potential. At this ultimate level, reality itself becomes a malleable reflection of consciousness fully aligned with its highest capacity. This is the culmination of the journey: absolute coherence, continuous creation, and mastery at the highest scale. Every layer, every dimension, every moment integrates into a single, unstoppable flow of deliberate, empowered existence. Life is no longer navigated, it is authored. Reality is no longer encountered, it is designed. Potential is no longer latent, it is continuously realized, moment by moment, interaction by interaction, projection by projection, creating a dynamic, living synthesis of ultimate mastery.
Final chapter: the absolute realization. This is the point where everything converges. All observation, all mastery, all projection, and all influence coalesce into a single, unstoppable current of deliberate creation. Life is no longer fragmented, reactive, or unpredictable. Every thought, every action, every subtle energy ripple merges into a continuum of absolute coherence. Presence, intention, and reality move in perfect synchrony, producing outcomes that once seemed impossible, opportunities that were invisible, and freedom that was unimaginable. Imagine the mind as a prism, each thought a beam, every action a reflection, and each projection an amplification of potential. These beams intersect, refract, and magnify, creating patterns of influence that ripple across personal, collective, and systemic dimensions. Past limitations vanish because they no longer exist as references. They are replaced by deliberate alignment with possibility. Fear, doubt, hesitation, and external constraint are observed as data streams, absorbed and redirected into the continuous act of creation. Life is no longer a reaction. It is a deliberate unfolding, precise, fluid, and infinitely expansive. Consider Kale, whose life had once been defined by distraction, indecision, and unconscious authority. Each challenge had appeared insurmountable. Every interaction filtered through limitation. Every opportunity lost to hesitation. With mastery, Kale transformed thought into instrument, perception into lever, action into influence. Each micro-decision aligned with internal frameworks and external potential. Relationships, environments, and long-term trajectories responded as extensions of his coherent energy. Creativity surged, influence expanded, and opportunity multiplied in ways that seemed instantaneous, yet were built on cumulative precision. Life itself became a canvas, and Kale the artist, painting reality moment by moment with intention so precise it defied ordinary comprehension. The mechanics are infinite yet precise. Observation intercepts every unconscious impulse. Frameworks are continuously rewritten to align with potential rather than limitation. Projection shapes perception in self, others, and environments. Actions cascade through networks, influencing both immediate and long-term trajectories. Feedback loops compound influence. Every layer amplifies the next, producing outcomes that expand across dimensions, scales, and systems. Continuous creation becomes self-sustaining, ever-expanding, and inexhaustible. Physiologically, mastery manifests as coherence, resonance, and effortless power. Breath, posture, and gesture synchronize with thought and projection. Nervous system responses are calibrated for precision. Energy flows seamlessly, and emotional states amplify clarity and focus. Presence radiates authority without a single word. The body is no longer separate from thought. It is a living extension of consciousness, projecting influence across space, time, and systems. Every micro-action becomes a lever, every subtle energy shift a multiplier, every projection a force that reshapes reality in real time. Even the smallest refinements compound across dimensions. Tiny adjustments in thought, posture, or perception cascade into behavior, interactions, and long-term outcomes. Patterns that were once invisible emerge as predictable leverage points. Opportunities materialize where limitation once dominated. The act of creation becomes continuous, self-reinforcing, and exponential. Mastery is no longer an achievement. It is a sustained state of presence, alignment, and influence that expands indefinitely. This is the absolute realization: freedom without limitation, influence without effort, potential without boundary, and life as a continuous, unstoppable act of deliberate creation. Every moment is yours to shape. Every interaction is leverage. Every trajectory is aligned with possibility. Every system, relationship, and environment responds to coherent intention. Life is no longer navigated. It is designed. Reality is no longer encountered. It is authored. Potential is no longer latent. It is continuously realized, amplified, and expanded at the highest scale. The journey concludes here, but the practice endures. Every second is creation. Every breath is leverage. Every thought is alignment. The ultimate mastery is now your living reality. Continuous, infinite, unstoppable. Listen, if this audiobook gave you even one powerful idea, don't just stop here. Hit subscribe right now, tap like, and share it with one person who needs this. Your growth and theirs starts with this click.